My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sangran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Nyanis. Hope all of you all are in good health and good spirit. And what I'm going to do today is going to continue Mahan's philosophy and teachings that are aligned to many of the other Advaitic philosophy. And it is continuation of chapter 15 in the I God book. But I want to bring back to some of the key philosophies that been talked about in the various other scriptures. But here, this chapter, Swamiji speaks about some of the challenges and some of the difficulties and some of the issues that confront humanity. And we all go through this various challenges in our lives. And in the first lecture, I spoke about some of the issues that confronting humanity. I think all of us know that many of us live a very blessed life in the sense that we don't have famine and, we have abundance of food. Perhaps the problem is that I think there's a lot of wastage of food. But in the first class of this chapter 15, I spoke about some of the issues that confronting our societies. We see this not just in third world countries, but we see this in many countries, including in our own country. Issues of famine, suicide, inequalities, racism, war. We have a war in Europe, poverty. So in the last 2-3 years, we've seen so many people that suffer due to loss of jobs and so on. Mental health is a big issue, and not just among the poor, but among the wealthy and the affluent. There's a lot of mental health, depression, and I think the COVID has, intensified that. So we, as a society, have major issues and challenges in spite of all the developments that we have gone through. We've made significant breakthroughs in science and medicine and technology. In one hand, we have made a lot of progress, but some of the progresses also has caused problems of, addiction and pollution and so on. So as part of being in this spiritual journey, we have to be conscious, and we also have to be able to understand what these challenges are, why these challenges are. All of us go through these challenges. Part of life is actually going through both the sukhas and the dukkha. And how well we are able to manage the sukha and dukkha depends very much on our spiritual maturity. Sometimes we are confronted with health issues, sometimes financial issues, sometimes relationship issues, and there are many things that impact us. And sometimes we become too comfortable. We are in a comfort zone, and when things change, things become very difficult. So how does how does spirituality help, or how does Mahan's meditation help, or how does Advaita teaching actually help us? And here Swamiji speaks about, in this chapter, some of the challenges and the perils of society. One hand, you have a lot of development. On the other hand, others are, deprived of food and homes and clothing to make way for rapid developments. On one hand, we have a lot of medical breakthroughs, as we saw in COVID, new vaccines, but the rich world gets the vaccine first, and amass a lot, but the poor countries do not get it. We also see a lot of exploitation. He speaks about exploitation, how impoverished countries lose their best workforce, lose their best assets to other developed countries, hollowing out and making things even worse. So he covers this, and he also sees that people spending a lot more resources on, institutions that may not bear a lot of fruits, but don't invest in education, training, development. So he says that how can one change one's life? And he says that the only way one can transform one's life is to really understand and harness the power within oneself. I'm always, amazed with some of the discussions in many of this by the spiritual masters to move things outside, to change things outside, you know, the movable, we want to move and transition our lives. It's a beautiful saying that until we understand the immovable power in us, we would not have the power to move anything, right? Until we understand and harness the immovable power in us, we would not be able to move anything. And what is that immovable power? How do we get to that immovable power? And this is the part that is in here. He speaks about, we can't change anything until we are able to change ourselves. And I use this very important description that the term CEO, oftentimes we use chief executive officer. That means you have full control over an institution, or you cannot be a good CEO unless you are a good chief enlightenment officer. If you are a good chief enlightenment officer, then you have executive power over everything, your life, your destiny, and make a difference. But if we don't harness that enlightenment in us, the enlightened power in us, if we don't realize the chief enlightenment officer in us, we would not have executive power over anything. Other things will rule us, rituals and, in Tamil we say Mura Nambike. Mura Nambike is actually, what's the English word? I can't remember what the English word is. It's not coming. It's, myths and things that have no solid foundation, right? And mythology and, so you see that sometimes when we do not introspect, contemplate, reflect, and meditate on why things are happening, when things are happening, and this is the part that is so important, that all the changes we need to be able to understand, and that understanding comes only if we're able to harness our jnana, our wisdom, knowledge, the experience. So humanity is faced with this because we do not put in enough resources to understand who we are. That's what Swamiji says, that you cannot attain world peace unless we are at peace. So how do we attain this? So how do we address these issues that impact humanity, societies that we live in, and ourselves? We get through, there's a lot of turbulence, there's a lot of unhappiness. I'm sure, when Malaysia is going through this election, and there are many people that are really upset. There are many people that are really unhappy and so on. So this is happening. And so how do we manage this? How do we manage ourselves to address this? That's not, not only that, climate change, I know families that are suffering from COVID, all kinds of issues. And how do we get a balanced mind to be able to navigate through this turbulence? How do we use the sukha and dukkhas as a combustion for our enlightened life? And this is what I want to speak about today, that pick up some of the values that Swamiji and other great saints and Advaita teachings teaches us. So in the first part, I want to then talk about what are the goals and purpose of life? What is it that we want to achieve in life? Right? And, most people, don't understand what the goals and the purpose of their lives, and when I went to the US, I met many people, and some of them are very successful financially and materially, but they asked me one question, I've made a lot of money, I'm doing very well, but is that what life is all about? what is the goal, and many of them have gone to different practices in search of this, right? So I'm sure that one fine day, maybe not today, tomorrow, but one fine day you'd ask, what is this life? Why am I here? What is the purpose of life? And what are the goals? To really understand this is where we see that the deep introspection really starts helping you reflect. Why are we here? What is our purpose? And what is it that we want to achieve in our lives? So, and this is the part that is, there are systematic ways of really, deciphering these questions that we have. So this whole notion, this what we call the fourfold purpose of human life and existence, and the whole idea of, uh, in some scriptures, they call it the four Purushastas, so which is, the four, important values, the four values that lead us to this purpose of our lives and our goals in our lives. The first one is actually Dharma, and the whole idea is, why am I here? This notion that, all of us ask this question, why am I here? Right? And if you see, to really understand this, one needs to understand what life is all about, right? So when we want to become, whenever we want to be very good in a particular profession, we spend 4, 5, 6 years in university, trying to, study really well to be on top of that learning, that skills, that competency. So here it is that to know life itself requires us to spend some time and understanding life, right? So here, part of the Dharma is that we are living, the whole idea is, do we know what living is all about, right? We get up in the morning, we do whatever we have to do, we go to work, we come back, all that are part of life. But the whole idea is that, is this the right way of living, right? Is this, the way that we live that leads us to the purpose? People just live, but sometimes there is no purpose. So the whole idea of Dharma is to acquire the knowledge that enables us to understand what is the right way, and I'll define what that right way is. The right way of human life, the right human behaviors that are necessary to understand who we are and the things around us. So what does that mean? What is the right living? Is there a wrong living? The right living is the living that enables us to understand who we are as a being. What is it that our purpose is? And that requires a fair bit of mastery. To become a lawyer, you really have to spend 4 or 5 years in practice. If you want to become a doctor, you spend, high school studying your science, biology, then you do your MBBS, and then you do further specialization. So we spend a lot of time to get specialized training. But what is the training that we need to acquire to understand about life? Where do we get that knowledge? Everything that we know about life is taught to us by our parents, in schools, and so on. But is that what life is about? What they teach us is life skills. They teach us about, how to behave, how to look after ourselves, how to create a profession, how to be. All that's what they teach. Is that what life is about? Right? But nowhere people teaches us that, if you see in university, we teach about, things around us, the forces around us, and so on. But the word university comes from the word universality. That means comprehensive knowledge. But we only teach about the material world and so on. But nobody teaches what, we teach about things that are moving, things that are happening, all those. So we teach about the movable, but we don't teach about the immovable stuff in us. We teach about everything about the material world, but we don't teach that which the material world is powered by, our spirit, that immovable. So who teaches that? In most homes, religious teachings are very mechanical, very ritualistic. People sing the songs and chant the mantras without knowing what the meaning is. So this is what dharmic knowledge is. Dharmic knowledge is about knowing the essence of what we practice, right? Practice in a broader sense. When we practice devotion, it is about the divinity in us, knowing the divinity, that we become devoted to it and we become devotional, right? Most of it is acharas or rituals, and people don't understand the meaning of rituals. Yesterday, I spent some time in the Klang Center explaining some of these rituals and how these rituals have so much meaning. So the knowledge is about the knowledge of why something happens, how something happens, very similar to what a scientist would do. If we are doing these rituals, what is the purpose and the benefit of this ritual? This is what dharmic knowledge is. Actually, the dharmic knowledge is very scientific. This is what all the Advaitic masters have done. Okay, let's see what's real. They shed one by one by one, going deep down. Ultimately, they come to that which is shedless, that's which is formless, that which is dimensionless, that which is immovable. So the dharmic knowledge is the knowledge of introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, step by step. So training the mind to ask questions about the truth. Is this what truth is? And there's a beautiful part in one of the Upanishads is that when the disciple asks, is this what it is? The Guru says, no. Is this what it is? Neti, neti. He says that no, this is not what it is. If you know what this is in a material stuff, it is not that real thing that you're talking about, because it's subject. There's a part that is formless and dimensionless. If you can show what this divinity or that spirituality in the form, that's not what it is. So this notion of why am I here, the question is that you need to ask, what is the I that I'm speaking about, right? Who is this I? Is this I, this body and this material personality, or is it something else, right? Of course, the body, we know everything about the body, how the body was born, and what are the processes of the body. Is that who we are, right? And why is this body here? And what is, animating this body? And these falls in the realm of dharmic knowledge. The mind goes deep down to try to understand who is the animator, who is this immovable. And as you go deeper and deeper, you start seeing that your material personality is powered by something far, far superior, unblemishable. It's like the knowledge that gives you so much resilience that nothing impacts you as you go deeper and deeper. So when you say a dharmic mind, means a mind that is so powerful that is not touched by the cause and effect. Yes, your body gets sick. Yes, you get flu. Yes, you get, body can get cancer. Body can get all kinds of disease. But as the mind anchors on the body, all the sickness and the frailties of the body is imprinted on the mind. So the great saints teaches us this knowledge of slowly decoupling from that mind to realize that there is something far superior and enable the mind to anchor on that. As the mind slowly starts doing that, the frailties and the blemishes and all the things of the body slowly weakens, and you see that you attain that transcendentality. So this dharmic knowledge is the knowledge that we are speaking about. We've been speaking about for so many years on this. It's not about the body. It is about the mind that is powerful when it's anchored onto that spirit that is formless, dimensionless, immovable. But that requires understanding, taking not an external journey, but an internal journey. So the purpose, the goal, and the purpose of life can only be understood if we acquire the dharmic knowledge, the knowledge of the self. And unfortunately, many people don't put in a lot of effort. They do a lot of religious things, they do a lot of ritualistic things. The rituals don't get you there. The rituals are the kindergarten step to take you deeper. There is a part called acharas, rituals, and there's a second component called vichara, which is introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation, which is actually cultivating that dharmic knowledge to transform the mind into a dharmic mind. So whenever we say dharma, means it seems that, it is become like a philanthropic, or that what it actually means is dharmic mind leads you to a universal mindset. That's where altruism and everything, but that's not what it is. Dharmic mind is the mind that understands that it is not the body, it is not the brain, it is something far superior that animates all of this. And that comes from the Advaitic teachings and teachings like the I God philosophy, that we need to spend a lot more time, understanding it, reading, reflecting. So a knowledge that powers everything else, and I'm going to come to that. So this dharmic knowledge is very important, and in some sense, it is somewhat like a scientific, logical, step-by-step approach to discover who the true reality is, what the true reality is. The second part is also very important. So when the mind is powerful, when the mind is unblemishable, and when the mind recognizes I am that immovable that moves everything, right? Then the thing is that what do I do with it, right? So this is the part that goals and the purpose of life. Do we run away from things, or artha is actually wealth, right? So wealth. So here you see that even Mahan and all the great saints talk about wealth is important. There are different types of wealth. So here I spoke about the 10 different capitals, right? The capitals include, spiritual capital. That is the most important capital. The spiritual capital can only be realized if one cultivates a dharmic mind. There's no way one could acquire the spiritual capital, understanding of the spirit, without that knowledge of the dharmic. No rituals, no external pilgrimages will give you that. It has to be an internal, inward pilgrimage. So artha is about acquiring that spiritual capital. When you get that spiritual capital, you acquire what we call that mental and emotional capital. You're able to modulate and moderate the sukhas and dukkha's. You attain this beautiful state of samatva. When you acquire that mental capital, we see that, you acquire that physical capital. All the stresses and all the, worries disappear. You come to a state where, I have God with me, I have divinity with me, I don't need anything else. Death or disease or nothing, I am unblemishable, right? So the mind becomes powerful, right? The body becomes healthy. And I've seen people who had stroke, when they start practicing this and they start pulling their body, and slowly, they're able to start walking, and including, starting to run and do other things. But I've seen cancer patients, in the final stages, when they don't give up, when they practice this, the cancer goes into remission. So it is that positive attitude. Yeah, disease may take you out, but the positive attitude itself is a therapy, So that when the body is healthy, the brain is healthy, right? We see that our intellectual capital goes up. Ability to think, our ability to make inferences, our ability to rationalize becomes really good. So our intellectual capital increases because the brain now is nourished with blood and resources and the right hormones and everything else, and the neural networks are firing away. Concentration becomes good. Memory becomes really excellent, right? So you can relate to things. You don't forget things, right? Our intellectual capital goes up. Now, with spiritual capital, with mental capital, with physical capital, with intellectual capital, you start getting creative capital. You become very creative, whether cooking food or music or writing or speaking, our creativity goes up, right? That's artha, and this is Swamiji and great saints speak about that knowledge that comes from that source of that spiritual capital, right? So we see this, in the context of that our creativity goes up. That is why you see that many people who are musicians and poets, they're in the deep meditative state, they are able to unlock that creativity in them. Beautiful music comes up, beautiful poetry comes up, beautiful writing comes up. As a scientist, the creative capital has enabled me to discover many things, human behavior, economic models, scientific phenomena. It's amazing, after that 4:30 to 5:30 meditation, when I go back to my research work, wow, it gives you new ideas, you discover new things. That's creative capital. That's artha. When we get that creative capital, something very interesting happens. We acquire what we call the natural capital in us. The natural capital comes from nature. We are built by nature, and nature has so much power and resources and amazing things that is in nature, that is part of us, who are also a building block of nature. Nature has not given everybody everything, but nature has given everybody something to realize their full potential. And that's something we only through introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, we are able to say, aha, this is what nature has blessed me with, and this is what my purpose in life is, to be part and parcel of nature. Nature is infinite potential and possibilities, right? I may not be everything, but I am one of the possibilities and potentiality. So I plug into that infinite, right? So, and that's what nature teaches us, whether in mathematics or poetry or music, it comes from within, and that is why you see that great musicians, the beauty of the soul is revealed through their music. Beauty of that soul or divinity is revealed through the mathematics, the complex mathematics, and the beautiful equations that they try to capture this nature. See, Einstein discovered E is equal to mc squared. That's true, that deep introspection, contemplation that is able to discover the theory of relativity. So in that same context, if you're a cook, you design, you develop a menu that is awesome, right? So that's what natural capital is that nature has blessed us with something which is amazing if we focus on. So when we acquire that natural capital, we acquire an important capital, the ability, that confidence in us, the ability to say that I have God in me, I have the divinity in me, I have the universe in me. I don't have to beg anyone for anything. I've been blessed with it. So you see that you get something called the empowered capital, the confidence that no matter what the situation is, no matter where they put you in, you have the resources to be able to live a harmonious life. It could be disease, but yet you said, no problem, I can overcome this. They can put you in a desert, you can still, create a vibrant ecosystem. And that's what empowerment is that self-sufficiency. And that's what the artha is about, that the ability to say, look, I can do it. I have divinity, I have the universe in me. to have that infinite potential and possibilities. So when you have that confidence, you develop another important capital called social capital, ability to relate to everybody, because you have that resources, you don't have that deficiency, you're not self-centered, you've got the abundance of knowledge and resources, and to be able to, the social relationships, the emotional intelligence that we talk about, relating to different people, different circumstances, your mind becomes creative, even managing difficult people, right? And bringing them on board. That's artha, right? Now, when you come to that social capital, when you acquire that social capital, ultimately you see that everybody wants you. Everybody says, hey, this person is of value to me. You're able to create value for not only for others, but for yourself. And ultimately, you see that your economic capital, you will never be poor. You may not be a billionaire or a trillionaire, or, but you have enough resources to sustain yourself, live harmoniously. And that's what artha is, that Mahan and other great saints speak about. But it starts off with the dharmic mind that harnesses that spiritual capital. The next aspect is great. You've generated the wealth, right? All these 10 capitals. What about karma? Some people say, well, you cannot have desires and all these things. The wants and the needs are a human thing that nature has embedded in us. Without that, survival would not be possible, right? That wanting to exist, wanting to procreate, wanting to be able to continue life, all that are part and parcel of nature. It comes in the form of desire to eat, desire to mate, desire to acquire wealth, desire. All these are part of natural phenomena that nature has embedded for survival and sustainability. That's embedded in all of us, right? But the thing is that when desires become overwhelming and we become so fixated with it, that's the problem, right? We then would not explore and learn new things. So in this context, Mahan and other great saints say that, what do I want, right? So the whole point is that, how do I acquire the desires, the aspirations, the ambitions that make my mind expanded and universal, not make my mind shrunken and fragmented and fractured. So choose your desires very well. So Mahan and other great saints say that divinize your desire, right? If you feel like eating something, divinize it. Yes, make sure you're really very hungry and acquire food that is healthy and tasty. The same thing in relationships. Does it mean you should not acquire material wealth? No, acquire the material wealth, but use it appropriately, acquire it properly, right? So here, acquire this wealth properly, this artha, make sure that you acquire the knowledge, do it with a lot of integrity, and to divinize this desire that makes our mind more enlightened, enriched, and harnesses the 10 capitals that I spoke about, right? If if the desires, lead to toxic relationship, and I know in many families, they fight with each other or among friends, and there's a lot of enemies. These are toxic relationships that actually harm the mind and the brain and the body, right? So many people have a lot of knots and they can't progress spiritually or progress. So part of that acquisition of that wealth, that spiritual capital, should lead you to, I spoke about creative capital, I spoke about intellectual capital, I spoke about natural capital. All this should enable us to look at the desires, very, very carefully, and to be able to discriminate between what desires that makes our mind shrunken and weak, what desires that makes our mind expanded, grow, become inspirational, and have that awesome experience. So that's part of meditation too. That's part of introspection too. So I'll speak about enemies. Most people have a lot of people that they don't like, they hate, all these things, and we spoke about that, right? All these are knots that keeps us behind, right? So great to have desires, divinize your desires, be enriched by the desires, and have a wonderful life, right? And that's what Mahan and other great saints says, that it's okay to have desires, pleasures of life, but embedded with spirituality, embedded with that 10 capitals, and you see that the desires become truly inspirational, awesome. So what do I want? The whole idea is that the want, the desire, aspirations should be divinized, right? It's okay to enjoy food. It's okay to have, good, positive, reinforcing relationships, right? It's okay to have, material wealth, living in a comfortable home, driving a comfortable car, but not to show off, but to live in a comfortable way, in a safe, secure way, so that you have more time. It's okay to have a good job, good education. All this gives you comforts of life to discover who you are. And that reinforces that values and that inspirational life. That's what the goals and the purpose. And ultimately, there is a reason why I'm here, right? So this is, the third part of that purpose of life. And the last one is that if we acquired the dharmic knowledge, and if we are able to harness that 10 capitals and we divinize our desires, the fourth takes very nicely, beautifully. You will be able to attain moksha. That means divinizing our desires enables us to have an enlightened life. Every thought is divinized. Every thought is enlightened. Every speech is divinized. Every speech is enlightened and becomes inspirational. Every action is divinized. Every action leads to an enlightened and inspirational outcomes. And we see that, all that reinforces into an enlightened moksha, means enlightened life, not going to heaven. Life becomes heavenly. And you discover, who am I? You discover that infinite, that I is that infinite possibilities and potentiality, which Swamiji calls big I. And you see that your mind lens starts changing. The dharmic knowledge enables you to acquire the knowledge to transform the mind from being very narrow to being able to generate the 10 capitals, the spiritual capital that harnesses all the capitals, that enables you to understand the desires, ambitions, aspirations, and transform that into combustion for an enlightened life. And that leads you ultimately to the source of that enlightenment, which is actually that spiritual capital, or that we call it by different names, that self. And ultimately, when you come to the stage, you know what this life is all about, And this is beautifully captured in many of the scriptures, this journey by Mahan in the I God philosophy, by Adi Shankara in the Viveka Chudamani, by Shankara also in the Bhagavad Gita, which is written by Valmiki Maharishi. In Bhagavad Gita takes you through 18 chapters, right? So this evolution of the human mind starts with the dharmic mind that enables that artha, the wealth, the 10 capitals, ability to understand the desires of life, human life, and transforming that into divine and inspirational desires that leads to an inspirational life and an enlightened. Now, when that mind that is gross becomes refined by these 4 processes, the mind becomes universal, inspirational, divine. And when the mind does that, everything that it sees becomes divine, inspirational, and wonderful. And I'm sure all of you all are reading the WhatsApp messages that I put every morning. And you see that these four processes leads to that universal mindset that leads us to the universal peace sanctuary that Swamiji speaks about. And you see that, as I said, I don't have to go to an ashramam or a place of worship, because when the mind realizes this universality, every place you go becomes an ashram. Every place you go becomes a temple. Every place you go becomes an abode of enlightenment. God is never separate from you. You become one with this divinity. And when you do that, actually life becomes really an awesome journey. And coming back to this question of all these things here, these issues of pandemic, mental health, all those things, you see that where there is scar, through this mindset, you transform that scars into stars. Where it is impossible, you transform into I am possible. Where challenges you have becomes an opportunity for learning. And the beautiful part of this mindset is that, you don't wait for a miracle. You become the miracle. You don't wait for an angel. You become the angel. You don't wait for someone to help you. You become the hand that helps. So you see that at that moment, you step into the divine footprints of whatever we call it as God or Brahman or whatever. So this is the essence of overcoming challenges of life, from the scars to the stars. And that requires this mindset of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. And this is beautifully captured in Mahan's teachings, in Shankara's works, in all the great saints that have walked upon this earth. That's the message that they want to teach. We don't need to go anywhere to acquire this knowledge. All this knowledge could be unlocked from within. You don't need to spend $10,000, $20,000 going for classes to know this. You just need to spend some time with yourselves. It's free. This knowledge is free. And if you acquire this, it leads you to amazing, amazing things, an awesome journey. Now life becomes an awesome journey. So I hope that, this section that we covered gives you a little bit more illumination on what we need to do. The dharmic mind, generating all the wealth that, starting with spiritual wealth, divinizing our desire, and living a moksha-filled life. Sandosham. Thank you very much.